All right, I want to have some fun here for a few minutes. We've got the three manager finalists that I talked about last night. So if you missed that, it's about a half hour long. You can go watch or listen to that, where I gave the latest on the reporting from Kevin Acey about the three finalists. We don't know if it's only three finalists, but those are the three names that have been publicly put out there as the three finalists: Pujols, Hundley, and Niebla. And today, I was thinking, well, how about we dream about what the manager bench coach duos could be with these three guys? Because as I was doing some working out this morning, I was thinking like with Nick Hundley, because I'm high on Nick Hundley. I'd be stoked if the Padres hired Nick Hundley. Bud Black is not with the Rockies anymore. So I think he lives in San Diego. He was on Ben and Woods pretty recently. Would he be open to coming back to the Padres and being the bench coach for Nick Hundley, for one of his former players? Would that be something that would be cool to him to help out one of his former players? And then possibly go win a World Series in San Diego. Went to San Diego State, and him being here maybe would help. He could still maybe be a little bit involved with the Aztecs baseball program if he wants to as well. Obviously with the Strasburg news that happened this week. So I'm just throwing that out there. So we'll start with Hundley. Hundley as the manager, Bud Black as the bench coach, associate manager. Maybe there's people with egos that would think, no, I can't do that. I was a manager for a while in the big leagues. I'm not going to go down and step down and be the second in line to a guy that I managed. But I don't know if I view Bud Black as someone that would look at it that way. Maybe I'm hoping Bud Black would look at it and be like, no, that would be a pretty cool opportunity. Now, you do have to factor in, this was the organization, this was the GM that fired me as the manager. But from what I've heard, Buddy and AJ Preller, they still talk. And it seems like there's still a fine relationship there. It's not like it's a Bob Melvin, AJ Preller, where they probably have never talked since Bob Melvin left, So I would hope that could happen. Now, what would the coaching staff look like beyond that? I don't know. There's the whole talk about Ruben Niebla. Would Ruben Niebla stay on as pitching coach if they go hire someone else when Ruben was a finalist for this job? How would he feel if he gets passed over? Right? That's a valid question. So there's the Hundley thing there. And that would be, as a Padres fan who watched those games when Nick Hundley played as a Padre and watched those games when Bud Black was the manager and went to some of those games. And, I have that style Padres jersey, Tony Gwynn Jr. when he was number 18. But like I have that style of jersey. My mom has the sweet kind of like batting practice or like bullpen pullover or zip up jacket. Like thinking back and having those guys and have Hundley manage the team, like that would be pretty cool as a Padres fan. And I think Hundley could be a good manager. And Bud Black, like I have no doubt in my mind that he'd be a good person to have there in that dugout. Just a matter of, would Bud Black be willing to do that? And I guess, Nick Hundley probably would have some say as well. Would Nick Hundley want Bud Black being the bench coach? I don't know why he wouldn't. So we'll see about that, but that's interesting. Now, Pujols, Yadi Molina, I think, is the one that immediately comes to mind for people because former teammates, Yadi, with the catcher viewpoint, the game planning viewpoint, I think he'd have that pretty locked down there. And I don't question those guys' baseball knowledge. The only thing with that is, wouldn't you want someone that has managed for years in the big leagues to be Albert Pujols' bench coach? Would the Padres allow Albert Pujols to bring in whoever he wants to be the bench coach? Is that the smartest thing to do? But you're hiring Albert Pujols, like you should trust him to hire the guys that he wants so that it's a great relationship and they can get along. And if you're trusting Albert Pujols with his baseball knowledge, then maybe you should trust him with the hiring of a coaching staff. But I do think it would be smart to have someone that has managed before in that bench coach spot. Maybe it's bringing Scott Service down from the front office and having him be a bench coach. Don't know. But with Pujols, like I was trying to think of his former managers. Would Mike Scioscia come be a bench coach for the Padres? Tony La Russa, way up there in age. That's a no for me. So like those were the two former Pujols managers that stuck out to me there. So we'll see. Has Scioscia? I think Scioscia has interviewed, been connected to the Padres in the past for possible managing job. Although a lot of people have because there's been a lot of openings. Would they bring Phil Nevin to be a bench coach? Would he want to do that? Because Phil Nevin, I don't believe, is coaching anywhere right now. So those are just some names that come to mind there with Pujols. Nevin obviously used to be with the Angels. So there's that. Yadi and Pujols, like in terms of entertainment, must watch, press conferences and just the storylines around that. Obviously, you have Manny, Tatis, Bogey, those big personalities are just, really, really talented baseball players there. And you put Pujols and Yadi in that dugout too. Like there's a lot of star power in that dugout. Hall of Fame talents all over the place in that dugout, right? But there are questions of, you know, those guys in the dugout, have they done it? Which the answer is no at the major league level in terms of managing and bench coach and actually pulling the trigger. I would assume, though, that Yadi, when he was with the Cardinals, they gave him a lot of say on certain things in terms of like pitchers that he has confidence in, pitchers he may go to in certain situations, pitchers that he trusts in certain situations. Um, I think it would be smart to value if you're the Cardinals when Yadi was playing. I think it would be smart to value what Yadi is saying there. So we'll see there. Yadi has said that he wants to coach, manage in the big leagues or another league, Mexico, wherever it is. He posted this. Now, this was him in Cardinals Red, I think this October. Tagline proclaiming himself ready to return to the field, whether as a coach or a manager in MLB, Mexico, or wherever I can continue my baseball career, contributing and giving back to the sport I'm passionate about. So he didn't say just as a manager, he left open coaching. Would he take a coaching role under Albert Pujols? I would think he would. I definitely think he would. I'd be a little surprised if he wouldn't. But I am reading in this article from John Denton, MLB.com. This was in October. Molina has recently been in talks with manager Ollie Marmol and new president of baseball operations Chaim Bloom about a possible return to the Cardinals dugout in 2026 as a coach on Marmol's staff, per a source. So he could, like, what if he's offered the bench coach job for the Cardinals? What if he's offered the bench coach job under Pujols? Which one would he take? Would he take the Cardinals or would he go take the Padres? Maybe he wants to win as a coach, and maybe he thinks that'll put me in a better spot to manage in the future. Or because it's a little tricky there, right? Because then you'd probably pick the Padres over the Cardinals with where the Cardinals are at. But if he wants to manage quicker, would it be with the Padres or would it be, well, what if Marmol stinks it up next year and they can just fire him and hire Pujols and Cardinals fans will love that? So there's that. And you could be managing St. Louis Cardinals, which is an organization he loves. So there is that there. Obviously, there's other spots, other coaching staff spots other than just bench coach. Like they could bring in an experienced guy to be the bench coach for Pujols, and then have have Yadi be something else. I mean, they can make up any title. You can do whatever you want. We think of the obvious ones, but it can be whatever you want. You can be catching coach and assistant hitting coordinator, like whatever. So there's that with Pujols there. Ruben Niebla is the other guy I want to get to, obviously, that third one. Would he leave Brian Esposito where he's at if Ruben becomes manager? Because Ben Fritz, I assume they'd elevate him to be the pitching coach. I was trying to look back at Ruben when he was with the Guardians or the Indians, I think back then in 2021. at like some connections there because there are a lot of guys that followed Terry Francona over to the Cincinnati Reds. So I eliminated those because I assumed that they would stay with the Reds. But someone like Sandy Alomar Jr., I think last year was his 12th, it was his 12th year in 2021. So 13, 14, 15. I think this next year he'd be entering his 16th year with maybe not coaching, but I think that would have been his 16th year with Cleveland's organization if he were to stay in Cleveland. But he was right now on Cleveland staff under Stephen Vogt. You go to their website. It's Stephen Vogt as manager. The guy first underneath him is Sandy Alomar Jr., first base and catching coach. So there's no bench coach title here because the bench coach just left for the Baltimore Orioles job. So I don't know this. Is Cleveland like as fast as possible, trying to have Sandy Alomar Jr. be the bench coach so they don't lose him? Because Ruben, I don't know the relationship there, but they did work on the same staff in Cleveland. Sandy Alomar Jr. as the bench coach would be pretty interesting, I think. With the amount of years, obviously played the amount of years in baseball, being with Cleveland that long, being under Terry Francona, Stephen Vogt's been pretty darn successful. Um, the catching mind there, and then come and join in the Padres, like that would be interesting. So that's with Ruben. That's I think of Brian Esposito, and I think of Sandy Alomar Jr. in terms of connections. There's other guys, obviously, I'm sure that we could connect to Ruben Niebla that I'm not thinking about, or just relationships. I don't know how strong Ruben's relationships are with certain people with Cleveland. Maybe it's guys that he used to play with. I don't know. But for me, at least, the more fun thing about the bench coach duos, dreaming about those, is Hundley and Pujols, because there's names I can throw out there. With Ruben, it's a little bit different because I just don't totally know relationships there, and it's not like a Hundley situation where he played, and then there's managers where I'd be like, oh, maybe they could go help out Ruben as his bench coach, you know? I'm just thinking of guys that are on the current staff with the Padres, like Brian Esposito. He stands out. Um, would he be fine with keeping Tim Leeper at third? David Macias? Like, what's that relationship there? Really just the current coaching staff. What's the relationships there between Ruben and those guys? And then obviously the outside relationships. Um, so, yeah, a lot of those guys are with Terry Francona that were in Cleveland. So I tried to eliminate those guys. Like, for example, would Carl Willis, who's the pitching coach in Cleveland, who stayed when Terry left for Cincinnati, he stayed with Cleveland. So would he leave Cleveland to come to San Diego for the same job? But maybe Carl Willis's relationship with Ruben is better than his relationship with Stephen Vogt because Ruben was on the pitching side of things when Carl was on the pitching side of things. So maybe they were closer than Vogt and Carl Willis. But it seems like Carl Willis would want to stay in Cleveland. And also, like, do you want to lose Ben Fritz? Who would be the bullpen coach if Ben Fritz comes up and is the bench coach? I don't think this would happen, but like, would the Padres try to pay a lot of money to Ryan Flaherty to have him come be the bench coach for Ruben? Have him come back? I don't know. Buck Showalter? I've already tried to eliminate that just because of what has happened previously between the Padres and Buck Showalter. But there's obviously the Manny connection. I don't know about this. Is also I'm kind of messing around here, but like Adam Jones, what's his thought in? Because obviously he's a San Diego guy. Like, does he want to ever coach? I'm kind of just having fun. This one, I'm really trying to just have fun with this and just throw out some names here. Bring Haas back, be the bench coach, have him earn that contract. Bring Will Myers back. Would you have AJ Ellis come down to the dugout and have him be a bench coach? I would think that you'd want someone that, like, maybe you bring Scott Service down and have him be the bench coach to Ruben. But also these guys, you got to have Scott Service agree to want to do that. Um, is Bud Black, would he only be the bench coach for Nick Hundley, or would he do it for Ruben? Or would he only want to manage? Because maybe he can forgive the Padres for firing him in 2015 if he's offered the managing job. But I haven't heard Bud Black's name mentioned here. And I doubt that they'd go back to him for manager. But like bench coach would be interesting. Hundley, manager, Bud Black, bench coach. I would sign up for that. I would be excited for that. Any names that you can think of, let me know in the comments. But yeah, was just trying to have a little bit of fun for a few minutes here. That Bud Black, Nick Hundley thing kind of got me going this morning.